Well, we got an important weekend coming up here. I think that this is one of the toughest Final Four here for the committee in the NCAA, trying to decide who's going to be the Final Four teams. However, I believe that some of this is overlooked is that we seem to focus on the four best teams. I know that that's what the committee's trying to get, but having a committee decide who is the best team at the right time doesn't really make any sense to me. I mean, to give you an idea, I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan as well as a Florida State fan. That in 2020, pretty much everybody wrote the Buccaneers off. They were going to go to the Super Bowl and lose completely to the Kansas City Chiefs. And, well, we know that outcome. The Chiefs were unable to even score a touchdown. So, and any given Sunday is any given Saturday. I believe that who knows what can happen when these teams get into competition and momentum on their side. Florida State has been challenged through this year, obviously with adversity of losing two-star receivers during an important Miami game to now we're down to our backup quarterback with Travis going out. However, I think the backup quarterback, Rodmaker, presented himself in a better way for the second half of the Florida game. And let's face it, that's the biggest rival Florida State plays every year. And we had to go in Gainesville and play. And yet we still won by more than a touchdown. That can't be said for, say, Alabama, who virtually lost that game to Auburn, except for a Hail Mary at the end. Washington only won by a field goal. So I'm not going to sit there and say Florida State doesn't deserve the right to be in the top four. But even let's look at the rankings. Florida State's managed to defeat LSU, Duke, Clemson, Miami, Florida, and if they defeat Louisville, those were all teams that were ranked this year. Not to mention Clemson, we went into Death Valley and had not won there since 2014. So that's a lot of obstacles they had to achieve. If we look at Texas' schedule, which you keep bringing Texas up should be in instead of Florida State, Texas has managed to beat Kansas, Kansas State, Alabama, TCU, and Oklahoma. All those teams were in the rankings of this year. Now, Georgia, if we look inside of the top four, who's played a tough year and season? Georgia, not so much. I mean, Georgia has played Missouri as well as Ole Miss, which were top ranked. They did play Tennessee and Florida and Kentucky, but those teams are no longer ranked in the top things. Tennessee's still hanging in there. But now they're going to be challenged with Alabama. The one to me that didn't play anybody is Michigan, and everybody seems to forget this. Michigan has played Penn State and Ohio State. If you look at the rest of their schedule for this season, I couldn't even tell you where these schools are, let alone the fact that Michigan played a top opponent. Yes, they played Penn State. Penn State's kind of like that little tick that keeps hanging around. I'm not so sure Penn State's won any equivalent games. I still think that ultimately they play half their year with playing nobody, and then all of a sudden they play a couple big games, and we're supposed to sit there and highlight them. I don't believe so. Washington, in their rankings, they virtually played Arizona, Oregon, and Utah and USC. Not so sure where that's gotten them, but Washington's going to have their challenge against Oregon. I think Oregon's virtually played about the same type of opponents. So Oregon and Washington are going to cancel themselves out, basically figure out which one, whoever wins the championship game will be into the playoffs. And I think no one's going to complain on that. But when you have Alabama getting in there, and people have talked about if Alabama beats Georgia, will the SEC not be playing in the playoffs because Alabama can't get in unless Texas gets in? I don't find that to be true. I think ultimately, if you look at even if Texas wins, Texas is going to be playing Oklahoma State, which is ranked 18. Alabama would have defeated the number one team, but Georgia doesn't have a strong record of who they played during the season either. Ultimately, I think that the committee has already made the decision by saying that if these four teams win, they get in. Now, ultimately, Oregon's the only one to which everybody seems to think Oregon's going to beat Washington, which I'm still trying to figure that out considering Washington has already won that this season. But I still think whoever wins that, the Pac-12, they're going to be in. Michigan doesn't have much of a challenge in playing Iowa, who is ranked 16, but Iowa's also down a lot of players. I don't think Michigan's going to have that big of a challenge. I think the two biggest challenges of the top four teams are definitely going to be the Georgia versus Alabama, and then Florida State playing Louisville because Louisville's is still a top-ranked 14 team, and they were ranked 10, I believe, last week. So I find that Florida State can still look bad in some cases if they don't play Louisville that well. However, I don't think that should still dictate that they don't get into the playoffs. Do they deserve it? Any team that deserves getting in there. And I know you're trying to find the four best teams, but that's very hard for a committee to sit there and decide the four best teams, as I alerted to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Um, any given Saturday, who knows who could win? I believe that Florida State takes care of business. Rod Maker gets the confidence, and they play in Louisville. They are a team not to be, reckoned with. They're going to be a team that is in the top four and could compete for the national title. I don't think that you could go to Georgia, Washington, Oregon, or even Michigan and say, hey, is it easy? You think you're going to play Florida State and you're going to be able to wipe them off the map? I'm pretty sure nobody's going to say, yeah, I'm 100% thorough in that. So I believe the Knowles have a great chance, and I'm looking forward to a good weekend, and go Knowles.